Chapter 1. Kauai Island, Hawaii. 14th of February, 2021, 1600 Hawaiian Standard Time. The Hawaiian Sea was calm, and the sky an immaculate sheet of turquoise. Streaks of pink and orange spread across the horizon, eager to accept the sun's daily embrace. Birds squalled beneath those clouds, as if to spur the heavens to their inevitable conclusion. But Kailani priest did not hear their call. He was beneath the sea, and completely at home. It had been nearly 7 minutes since he had dived, and the concerns of the surface were far from his mind. It was here, on the hunt, that Kai was most at peace. With his eyelids half closed to avoid detection by any vigilant prey, he swam into a narrow crevice between two jagged pieces of rock just between the brightly colored coral reef. According to his watch, he was now 64 feet down and the temperature had dropped to 71 degrees Fahrenheit. By his estimate, he still had 4 or 5 minutes left, including surfacing time, more than enough for a patient hunter. He moved slowly and with a fluid grace as he closed in on his target. Even the slightest disturbance of the sand would spoil the hunt. Kai had been diving since he could walk, and the water was even more comforting to him than land. It was simply part of who he was. His mother, Darcy, was a 2-time world champion freediver, and his father was the legendary Hawaiian waterman Dyson Priest, the only man to ever successfully swim the Molokai Channel twice in one day, all during a full-blown hurricane. If any human being in history had been bred for life beneath the waves, it was Kai. By the age of 17, and with the help of an invitation to the Late Show, Kai became known around the world for his incredible feats of endurance in the water. He had even been asked to participate in several university studies, none of which gave any full accounting of his abilities. His longest recorded dive was over 19 minutes. As one researcher at MIT put it, he was part amphibian, or at least part crazy. Continuing his hunt, Kai settled down on the bottom of the ocean floor and lay motionless at the corner of the reef. He was just outside the crevice where he had spotted tiny bubbles leaving the small outlet en route to the surface. Having reached his destination, he went into what his mother had referred to as flow. It was the science of motionless intention. Everything slowed until the world nearly stopped. His heartbeat, his muscles, his mind. He was motionless, part of the water. In a sense, he simply was. His eyes were practically shut, but they were of less use to him now than his other senses. The reef teemed with life. He could feel the fish move around him in schools, each of which charted its own course in the daily search for food and safety. The same eddies and currents which swayed the coral fingers and tufted anemones moved across his body, leading him in a dance as old as the tides. He allowed himself to melt away into the precious moment, which was rare even for one who spent so much time underwater. Suddenly his senses came into focus. His prey was near. In his right hand he clasped a 52-inch Koa Force 2 spear gun. His forefinger rested gingerly atop the 1-pound trigger. Just the slightest flinch would activate the release, or pull set, just like a good rifle. He watched through slitted eyes, patient and focused on the moment to come. Finally, out of the reef pocket came his prey, an unsuspecting eel. 4 feet long, it gazed around lazily with beady eyes, mouth ajar to reveal a set of razor-sharp teeth. Unaware of Kai's presence, it slithered out and stopped right in front of him. Kai could now see his pupils darting left and right in rapid motion. It almost appeared to be smiling at him. It had been nearly 9 minutes since Kai had dived. He lay on the ocean floor in his camouflage wetsuit, the object of his pursuit nearly at hand. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Kai nudged his trigger finger. The gun's band released, and the arrow pierced flesh. A perfect shot, right behind the right eye. The eel was his, soon to be part of a delicious roll of unagi sushi. Kai reeled in his dinner and began to place the blood-soaked creature into his net bag when an ominous shadow appeared. From the corner of his eye, he spotted a huge, striped and scarred 14-foot tiger shark. Seriously? I don't have time for this shit today. The fish was huge. Not just long, but as fat as a Volkswagen, with stripes from its nose to its caudal fin. She had deep scars and tears all over her dorsal fin and face. a testament to adventures and trials only fellow predators could comprehend. She took a quick inspection pass to analyze the situation. She was hungry, and she could smell the kill. It was said that sharks could also smell fear, but she would find none in Kai. Kai knew this particular shark very well. He and his family had been commingling with her kind on these reefs for the better part of 40 years. A mutual respect and acknowledgement between the two were apparent. To Kai, the shark was an Aumakua, or deity. She was there to protect and inform him. Exactly what she was protecting him from, he was not sure. She was also there to see if any food was available. As blood slowly blossomed from the eel, Kai opened his eyes as wide as possible and stared directly at the shark as she circled back for a second pass. "Gypsy, thank you for your guidance," he thought reverently as she approached. "Today is not your day. You must find your own dinner." She turned her eye towards him, flashing her teeth while seeming to consider whether he was worthy prey. The moment stretched on, but Kai never flinched or broke eye contact. There was no fear in either of them, merely the cold, calculating consideration of the other. This was her world, and evolution had sculpted her line into the perfect predator for it. On any other day, she would have been the most dangerous creature on the reef, but Kai had been shaped by far more than simple evolution, and knew that even here, in her home, the odds would be even at the very worst. Seeming to arrive at the same conclusion, she made a deliberate turn away from him. A few seconds later, just as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. He waited a few seconds before gracefully returning to the surface. As his head broke above the sea, he filled his lungs with the warm Hawaiian air. Swimming calmly, he found his anchored jet ski and climbed aboard. He removed his mask and placed his gun in the ready-made holster on the ski. With catch in hand, he set out for the boat landing. It was time for sushi. Chapter 2. Washington, D.C. 15th of February, 2021, 1200 Eastern Standard Time. Breaking news. 5 men killed by Somali pirates. A banner with those words ticked by on the bottom of the screen, taunting him from the small TV mounted on the wall in the corner of the meeting room. The story had broken that day. Gary Cofield drummed his fingers on the wooden conference table impatiently, waiting for the crisis team to arrive. He stopped drumming and smiled as Stacy Long, the White House press secretary, peeked into the door and entered. "Gonna be a good one," she said with a plastic smile. "Yep," he nodded. "Have you been watching the news?" "Yeah, there's already a lot of traffic on Twitter," she confirmed. As if to emphasize, she looked down at her phone and with her thumb began to scroll the newsfeed. Since Gary had been named chief of staff, Stacy was his favorite pick. Ambitious, polished, and just smart enough to stay ahead of the sharks out in the press pool. The perfect face. The crisis team finally arrived at his door, and they began to take their seats as he pressed. "Do you think we should call the Hawk?" "Nothing's trending yet, but I will send an alert to keep an eye out." "Here." He slipped a note to Stacy, "in case it starts trending." She glanced at the note, which read RIF. "No problem," she acknowledged. RIF stood for Reverse Information Feed. Highly classified, it had been implemented years ago to help boost the social media presence of the former president. Since then, it had taken on a more proactive form of message control. A small army of paid contractors bumped favorable stories, commented on message boards, anything to give them an edge in the 24/7 news cycle. Critics referred to it as astroturfing or fake news, but if one wanted to stay ahead of the curve, it was a necessity. After all, if their opponents did it, then why shouldn't they? They only had a few details regarding the report, nothing important. 5 Special Forces operators were killed off the coast of Somalia. 5 Special Forces operators were killed off the coast of Somalia during some sort of anti-piracy mission. Normally, this wouldn't have made headline news, but after everything that had gone on during the past week, anything pirates was red hot. Last week, Kate Ansari, the daughter of President Henry Ansari, had been kidnapped on the high seas while attending a yacht fundraiser. They were now calling it a cruise, which sounded a bit folksier. Their boat, the Sea King, had experienced mechanical problems near the Horn of Africa. They had been rescued from shore by U.S. Special Forces within hours. But what had followed were days of must-watch television as she made her way home and was dramatically reunited with her father, the president. He had soon after delivered a moving speech on the need to combat global poverty and increase military cooperation. But somehow, this story about these 5 assholes had stayed just above the horizon. There was some speculation about how this could be related to the Sea King. A few experts gave bullshit interviews, but nothing more than that. This was an inconvenience. But for now, nothing more. The channels would do a 10-minute segment every day and repeat it every hour until something else came up. The purpose of this meeting with the crisis team was to figure out what that something else could be. Gary looked around the room. All right, I think we have everyone. Assembled were Stacy, Eric Smith, the White House Communications Director, Karen Rice, State Department Press Secretary, Rich Simpson, Pentagon Public Affairs, and Noah Stevens, CIA Communications Lead. Gary gestured to the TV. I assume we all know why we're here. I thought we could start by reviewing the situation. Stacy had a notebook out, as if ready to write down his every word. The others ranged from moderately disinterested to downright bored. This story broke around 10 a.m. We all know the details of this incident are highly sensitive and potentially politically damaging, not to mention the security concerns. We're still trying to find out who the source was. They don't have any details aside from the size of the team and the location. The mission file is still classified, thanks to our friends at Langley. He nodded to Noah. So with that said, before we discuss a response, Noah, are we sure this thing is locked down? Noah nodded. We're sure. It's tight. Rich spoke up. I understand we've got some security concerns here, but I'm having a hard time understanding why we can't release the details of our investigation. I'm not blaming the White House. There were good reasons for the delay, and I'm sure there are equally good reasons not to share those with us. But the families deserve to know, and a proper investigation shows that we're taking this seriously. He paused for a moment. Unless there's some other angle that I'm not seeing here. It's not happening, Rich, Gary said flatly. It's as simple as that. He paused for a moment to let the comment resonate before continuing. All right then. I spoke with the president this morning, and we've decided to see if we can let this one sizzle out on its own before we draw any more attention with any kind of proactive response. The president said that? Rich pressed, a hint of incredulity creeping into his voice. The room was silent. Gary stared at Rich while others wiggled slightly in their chairs. A few others fidgeted with their phones. Gary eventually continued, in a hard tone usually reserved for rebellious congressmen or senators. This is direct from the White House. If you get any questions on this, the answer is that you cannot comment on classified information. What you can say is that these men were heroes who died during an important mission to protect American ships and cargo. We do not know of any linkages to the attack on the president's daughter at this time. A full investigation is ongoing. This incident is just another example of why Congress needs to act now and get our troops the support they desperately need, and approve the president's proposal for a standing United Nations military force. The investigation is finished, Rich mumbled. Gary's eyes narrowed. A full investigation is ongoing, Gary repeated. Are we clear? There were several nods as Stacy looked up from her phone. Is that the formal response, Gary? Run with it, he nodded. Got it, she confirmed. What about taking questions? Sure, a few, Gary allowed. You know the line. Things go wrong with these missions all the time. Bad weather, equipment failure, you name it. If any of you starts getting pressed on the details, you need to make it sound like they're questioning the professionalism and patriotism of these men. No, these heroes, he amended with false feeling. They were doing the job they signed up for and the mission went sideways. Shit happens. End of story. And if we can't find the source? Karen asked earnestly. We'll find the source, Gary said confidently. And it won't matter. As long as we're all on the same page, this thing will be ancient history in 2 weeks. The president's speech with his daughter was watched by 33 million people. 33, he jabbed his finger emphatically on the desk as he said the number, million. We've finally got momentum on this, and I'll be damned if I let it fizzle. Do your jobs, and we'll be just fine. And what is our job, Gary? Rich said with a hint of irritation. Gary glared at him before speaking again, thinking of a dozen eager and willing replacements as he did. We meet in 1 week. We all have press events between now and then, so let's stay focused. I'm going to say it again. He held up his fist and started ticking off talking points with fingers. Heroes. No connection to Katie and Sari. Investigation ongoing. Classified. UN, UN, UN. Stacy was looking at him again, waiting for him to say it. He almost smiled at seeing her pent-up energy, like a jet on the runway spinning up its engines for takeoff. We've also booked the Jimmy Connell show next week, he said, causing her eyes to light up. They've agreed to have Stacy on. They already sent out the questions to review. Should be mostly softball stuff. We'll have them put something in about the president's daughter. If anyone has any concerns with this, I need it in writing by tomorrow. Stacy was beaming as everyone stood from their chairs. Too easy, he thought with a self-satisfied smirk. Chapter 3. Secret Bay, North Shore, Kauai. 16th of February, 2021. 1800 Hawaiian Standard Time. Kai idled his ski into the bay just as dusk was approaching. The winds were calm and the swell was modest, typical for the winter. As he entered Secret Bay, he saw a group of local boys surfing the evening session. He gave a quick wave as he made his way to the river inlet where his truck was parked. The surfers waved back, all smiles. He navigated the shallow waters with precision, the product of years of local knowledge. He was careful not to hit any reef on his way in for fear of damaging the fragile coral. He couldn't care less about what that might do to the hull of his ski. He beached his ski, grabbed his dinner catch, and made his way up to the truck. Kai was considered a local hero of sorts in the community. He was well known for his accolades underwater, but also for his record of service to his country. Or at least those parts that were public knowledge.
"How's it, Kai?"
A young local asked as he approached.
"Some good grinds for dinner?"
"Hey, guy," Kai greeted. "When you gonna come dive and feed the family like me?"
"Shoots, man.
Kai grinned.
I like staying where I can catch the waves."
"You're missing out," Kai replied with mild censure, like an older cousin scolding a younger one for making the same mistakes he'd already made 100 times.
"It's 3 to feed and peeling, brah. You're missing out."
Kai just smiled at the young keiki and threw his catch into the cooler in the bed of his lifted 4x4. As he removed his dive skin, he thought, maybe he is right. Kai had missed many years of living on the island while being away. After 2 years in active duty army, he had been selected for special service and served 8 years under Special Forces Command with a Combined Arms Group, or CAG, known popularly as Delta Force. That had led to another 8 with Tiger Corps, a little-known military contractor. Kai was highly respected amongst the tight-knit circle of those who were known as operators. But after 18 years, 112 covert missions, 78 confirmed kills, and probably preventing a Third World War or two, he had decided it was time to trade in the UK-416 for a ukulele. It was time to go home. He was 36, and he wanted to see what peace looked like. How many swells had he missed? How many contests? How many parties with the crew? He had been gone from his family and the Aina for almost 2 decades. And what about the time lost with McKenna? After growing up together, he often wondered if McKenna resented the fact that he left. She never said anything directly, but he was no fool. After stripping down to his board shorts, he reached under his wheel well, grabbed his keys, and started the truck. He backed the truck to the shore and secured the ski to the trailer. As the sun fell slowly into the ocean, he took a minute to take in the beauty of the island. The ocean exuded a soft, orange peace, just as it always did at sunset. The dark gray lava rocks had stood a million years firm on the other side of the river and proceeded to wrap the island in its protection. The sand was a soft white with the occasional bit of driftwood, perfect for tonight's gatherings of drinking and music playing, which happened almost every night. I love this place, he thought with solemn conviction. He noticed a mound of plastic trash a few meters off to his left. A tangled mess of fishing wire, rope, a laundry basket, and other assorted junk from as far away as Japan marred the otherwise pristine sands. As he walked over to grab it, he noticed some tourists sunbathing and staring at him awkwardly. This was something that happened often. Kai was quite the specimen. A solid 6'1", he was upright and athletic. His shoulders were huge from his years of diving and surfing. He was lean, muscular, and tan. Unlike most of his family and friends, he had no tattoos. They were used as identifiers in war zones, and he never wanted the risk. He did have plenty of scars, which came in all shapes and sizes, from 6-inch scrapes to coin-shaped knots. So much for no identifiers. He gave a wry laugh as the tourists looked on. They all admired his physique, but the men's eyes lingered on the scars and cauliflower ears. The girls stared hungrily at his tan, confident good looks. He didn't mind the attention, but he didn't relish it either. It was just another part of the path he walked during his life's journey. He made his way over to the clump of flotsam and waved. "Aloha," he greeted as he grabbed a handful of the plastic trash. "Hey, maybe take some trash when you leave." It was not a question, and none of the tourists seemed to mind. "Sure thing, buddy," an overly sunburned tourist replied. Kai hopped back in the truck and plugged his phone into the charger. He turned on some Bob Marley and got started on the 5-minute drive home. He had been back for 4 months now and was just starting to settle into retirement. 16 years in covert work with over 100 missions, most of which were undocumented. He was really starting to appreciate his freedom. He relished the idea of barbecuing some fresh fish and playing music instead of getting shot at. Although he grew up here, there was definitely an adjustment phase happening. Unlike so many of his colleagues, Kai didn't suffer from PTSD, but what had changed was his heightened self-awareness of his surroundings. He could be somewhere as benign as the local fish market, and he would have 2 or 3 escape routes planned in case things went south. It was subconscious, but had become his nature. He'd given up trying to scold himself out of things like that. You can take the soldier out of the battlefield, but you can't take the battlefield out of the soldier, he had often heard. There was more truth to that than his younger self would have thought possible. The drive was pleasant and uneventful. He pulled into the long driveway lined on each side with palm trees and proceeded to the house. He passed the ohana where he stored his surfboards, dive gear, and about 10 or 15 of his preferred weapons. Bows, spear guns, blowpipes, basically any ranged weapon with a sharp tip. Wild chickens roamed the 3 acres just as they did throughout the island thanks to Hurricane Iniki back in '92. And hunting them was as much fun as duty, just like his earliest experience of the armed forces. McKenna's dog, Dojo, greeted him, tail wagging and grinning. He knew he would eat well tonight. He always did when Kai showed up soaking wet with the cooler in hand. He gave Dojo a quick pet, grabbed the cooler, and placed it on the lanai. "Hey, baby," he greeted McKenna as she stepped out front to greet him. "Hey, sweetheart." She smiled while offering an open, ice-cold bottle of beer. "How was it?" "The reefs are looking a little better. I went a bit deeper off secret for some uku," he said as he slugged down a mouthful of the frosty beverage. Kai didn't mention the fact that he had run into Gypsy, the tiger shark. McKenna knew Gypsy, but she got nervous and protective when she heard about the run-ins. After all, a tiger shark is still a shark. "I'll prep it," she beamed, every bit as excited and grateful for the coming meal as he was. She was an island girl to the core. In so many ways, she was home to Kai. She stepped out onto the lanai to take the cooler. Sitting suspiciously close to the open container was Dojo. "No, Dojo, you need to wait till dinner, boy," she scolded. He tilted his head sideways, drooped his eyes slightly, and proceeded to put on an Oscar-winning performance. It worked. McKenna just smiled back and let him be. "Damn dog, he is too cute." "Oh hey, did you talk to Uncle?" she asked Kai as she started to prep the fish. "No, why?" "He called and wanted to talk with you." "Why?" Kai cocked his head in surprise. "No idea," she shook her head. "Did he call you?" "I don't know, I didn't check." "It is a bit weird that he would phone the house, don't you think?" she shrugged. "He never does that." Kai looked around for his phone to see if Uncle Keikoa called. Shit, phone's in the truck. "Yeah, it is. I'll check," Kai replied as he stepped outside to grab his phone. Kai grabbed his phone from the truck charger and checked his texts. He had one alert from his uncle. Check the news. Talk soon. Chapter 4. Washington, D.C. 16th of February, 2021, 1300 Eastern Standard Time. Camera shutters and cell phones clicked as Stacy Long entered the room to deliver the State Department's weekly press briefing. She smiled as she approached the podium. Any second of this could be a front-page photograph, she reminded herself. She issued the same reminder each time she did one of these. Body language was key. She continued to smile as she arrived at the wooden lectern, adjusting the microphone to mouth level and ensuring she was centered with that world-famous crest affixed before her. "Good morning, everyone," she said with an even bigger smile as she opened her black leather binder. There were a few grumbled responses. "Well then, let's go ahead and get started. This was obviously a big week for us here at the Truman Building." She clicked the small remote in her hand and the screen behind her turned on, displaying an image of the president embracing his daughter. She paused a moment to let the image sink in. President Henry Ansari and his daughter Katie Ansari were dramatically reunited on Tuesday at Andrews Air Force Base. While speaking to the press after the event, the president outlined his gratitude to the men and women of the United States military for conducting the rescue. He also reiterated his continuing commitment to ensuring that the UN gets the funding it needs to adequately support global security. He insisted that the U.S. could no longer be the sole contributor to global peace, and renewed his call for Congress to approve his proposal to create a standing UN security force. Part of that security force would include a naval component designed to prevent these types of incidents. She paused, scanning the room and smiling. Some were taking notes, many simply recorded the briefings with their phones. In other news, she continued smoothly, the State Department is glad to announce the opening of its new assembly in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping was present for the ceremony and extended his congratulations. As she continued with the briefing, she fell into the familiar rhythm of speaking that she had become accustomed to using since taking the position. It was like poetry or a marching cadence. Not quite monotone, but skipping unnecessary emphasis on certain phrases or sentences. Speaking in this way not only allowed her to move more quickly through the briefing, but it also made it easier to slip in more controversial portions and move through them quickly. As instructed, she had not mentioned the Special Forces operators, and as always made sure to end on a high note. And we believe that increasing cooperation with the Pakistani government will continue to be an important pillar in the fight against international terrorism, she finished before drawing a breath. Are there any questions? Several hands shot up and she pointed at one. Yes, Bruce. Thank you, Stacy. Can you address the reports about the Special Forces men killed in the Gulf of Aden? Specifically, what was the White House's level of involvement? She continued to smile, even though it was clear that Gary's avoidance strategy had failed, but she was as adept at information warfare as anyone in this room. To present weakness was to invite disaster, so Stacy leaned in, ready to give battle. Well, Bruce, unfortunately the details of the incident are still classified, so I'm not really able to provide additional detail. What I can say is that these men were heroes, who, like all who serve this great nation, put their lives on the line every day to protect American lives and property. Just to follow up, Bruce deftly riposted. Surely you can comment on the White House's involvement without providing any additional detail about the incident itself. I'm sorry, Bruce, that's really all I can say, she said with a trace of false regret at being unable to give him what he wanted. Marjorie, let's go to you. Thanks, Stacy, Marjorie acknowledged briskly. Just to follow up on Bruce's question, can you give any explanation as to why these guys were so isolated? What were they doing in the area? And could this be related to the attack on the president's daughter? Okay, everyone, as I said, Stacy projected calm control as she kept any trace of annoyance from her voice. I cannot provide any details on this specific incident. At this time, we have no reason to believe this was linked to the attack on Katie and Sari. Let's move on. Several people spoke at once, and Stacy spoke over them, picking one of the newer members of the press corps, someone less likely to follow the developing line of attack. Erica, how about you? Thanks, Stacy, Erica nodded, but her eyes were hard as diamonds. Stacy knew even before she spoke that things were starting to unravel. Could you at least give some detail about how these men died? Why wasn't there any type of support from the Navy? This was right around the same time as the attack on the president's daughter. Shouldn't security have been heightened? Stacy's smile faded. As I just said, I'm not going to comment any further on this. Does anyone have a question on a different topic? She waited until a lone hand went up. Yes, Richard. Thank you, Stacy. My question is related to the attack on the president's daughter. We know that she was rescued on shore, but why wasn't there any response to the scene of the attack? How far away was the Navy? It must have taken them at least a few hours to get back to the shoreline from the location of the boat. Stacy began to shift on her feet before catching herself. Body language, Stacy. Show no weakness. Well, as you all know, there are a variety of factors that can affect response times. Communication, for instance. She fought to maintain the air of authority. Bad weather can impact response times. She shouldn't have speculated. She knew her mistake as soon as it came out of her mouth, but pressed forward in her best effort to limit the damage. Again, I cannot comment any further on the specifics of this incident, or any others in that area. Are there any other questions? Half a dozen hands were up. She gestured to one, without speaking, smiling with confidence she no longer felt. Can you give any information on when this information is going to be declassified? When should the public expect to learn more information about these incidents? She felt her face begin to redden. Okay, everyone. I've said it several times now. If there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and conclude now. Thank you. Several voices called out. Can you say anything to the widows of the men? When will the information be made public? Is the president going to respond to allegations about the White House? Stacy closed her binder. Thank you, everyone. She tried to move quickly to the exit as several more questions were asked or repeated. Halfway to the door, she stumbled on a camera cord with her heel. Idiot! Body language! Body language! Chapter 5. Secret Bay, North Shore, Kauai. 16th of February, 2021. 1830 Hawaiian Standard Time. The White House interview snippet concluded on his laptop, and Kai was left in stunned rage. Like the 500,000 other viewers in 3 hours since it was uploaded, he normally would have laughed at what he'd just seen. But the men she had just talked about were professionals, supported by the greatest military machine ever built by man. He felt his anger rising as a question blazed in his mind. What the hell was that? Not only was the bit about response times complete bullshit, but weather? Really? He closed the page and opened a search window. Weather, Mogadishu. A few links down, he found the historical weather patterns for Somalia. He looked at each day in February. 79 degrees, 77 degrees, 80 degrees. Winds 11 miles per hour, 8 miles per hour, 12 miles per hour. Nothing. Lying bitch. He thought about the last time he was in Somalia. They could have crossed to Yemen in 4 hours flat, and that wasn't even moving fast. A Navy ship already in that area could have been there in less than 3. He had to get in touch with Stephen Erickson. He would know what the fuck this was all about. After they had left Tiger Corps, Stephen had gotten back into the Navy. He was part of something called SWCC, or SWCC as they called it. Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewmen. They were essentially Navy SEALs, but focused on infiltration and extraction by small watercraft. Stephen had begged Kai to come with him. Kai was born for that work. The last time they had spoken, Stephen told him that they were mostly running pickups for SEAL teams that had gotten into trouble in Somalia. When things were slow, they supported anti-pirating efforts. If President's damn daughter had been attacked within 100 miles of them and a call had gone out, they would have been there. These guys didn't do slow. They didn't do communication issues. They operated. End of story. Kai closed his laptop. He had to talk to his uncle Keikoa and get in touch with Stephen. Keikoa ran a bar just outside town, but he knew the operator life just as well as Kai. Kai dialed Keikoa as he walked out to his car. His uncle picked up on the first ring.
"How's it, Kai?"
"Hey," Kai greeted. "You see this shit on TV about Somali pirates? Some boys got into trouble. When's the last time you talked to Stephen?"
"Why don't you come by, Kai? We'll talk here."
Kai felt a pang run through him. Yeah, okay. Kai started his truck and began the drive over to Keikoa's. He wouldn't acknowledge the fear. He had seen Stephen shot a dozen times and drowned at least half as many. It couldn't be him. They had a couple of teams in that area. It was someone else. He turned off the street and pulled into the modest parking lot in front of Keikoa's place. Right on the beach, with a thatched grass roof and rustic lumber construction, it was the very image of a beachside bar. The problem was he'd built it 5 miles away from anything else, so it wasn't a great commercial location. In fact, there was hardly ever anyone at the bar, and only rarely was it someone he or Keikoa didn't already know. But Keikoa never had trouble with money, or at least he never mentioned it. He had built this place for him, and he belonged there as much as any of the koa trees that surrounded it. But where peace and serenity were his usual greeters upon arriving at Keikoa's, this time Kai was pissed. Keikoa knew something and had called him there for a face-to-face, which meant it was serious. If it wasn't Stephen's team, it was definitely someone Stephen knew. Those guys didn't work without radios. If they had responded, which they certainly would have if the call had gone out, then the Navy would have known about it. And no rag-ass bunch of skinnies from some junkyard would have waxed them before the Navy had 3 more ships pumping tomahawks up their asses. It just didn't make sense. Kai parked in the small lot and walked up the short stairs onto the bamboo-covered porch. Keikoa was sitting on one of the chairs, carving a piece of knotted wood with a small pocket knife.
"Sit,"
he said as Kai stood in front of him. Kai stayed standing. "You know what's going on, Makua?"
"I don't know much, but I do know you need to sit."
Kai began to realize what was happening. It seemed surreal. He lowered into his seat, fighting against the urge to tense every muscle in his body. Okay. Keikoa looked at him, and in that moment, Kai accepted that it was true.
"Stephen is gone. His whole team. I'm sorry, Keiki."
"What are you talking about? That's impossible," Kai demanded. But in his heart, he knew his uncle wouldn't lie to him. Where was the Navy?
"I don't have many details. They were left 10 hours.
Kai buried his face in his palms as he struggled to contain his volcanic emotions. His hands curled into fists. After a moment, he raised his head. "This is bullshit. Where the fuck was the Navy for 10 hours? Keikoa looked down at his carving.
"I don't know anything else. I'm sorry, Kailani."
Kai shook his head as calm certainty overcame him. "I'm going to find out who did this." Keikoa fixed him with a hard but sympathetic look.
"There's nothing we can do for Stephen now. It's over, Kailani. And it's time to grieve. He was my child as much as your brother."
Kai shook his head and stood. I'm leaving. I need to find a TV.
Kailani.
Kai was already walking back to his truck. He backed out the driveway as Keikoa watched from the porch. He didn't even remember the trip home. His body was on autopilot. Steven's blood was apart from Kai's, but he was still his Ohana, his family. And in Kai's world, family never turned away from each other, not even in death. As he drove home, a burning anger overcame him, which just a few hours earlier he thought had become part of his past. That anger was a force of nature, a maelstrom descending upon him, moving and driving him in ways he knew from experience he could not suppress. So instead of suppressing it, or even containing it, Kai did the only thing men like him could. He channeled and focused it into an achievable objective. And that objective crystallized in his mind when he was halfway home. He would find the person responsible for this. And when he did, they would suffer the consequences for their betrayal. Once he arrived home, he reopened his laptop. The first search he performed was for which Navy ships had been in the Gulf that day. It took some time, but he found the USS Ronald Reagan, a Burke-class destroyer, was closest to the attack. The next morning, after making a few circumspect inquiries, he found the commander's name, Robert Carmichael. Wherever he was no longer the commander of the Reagan. After a few more minutes of searching turned up nothing, he turned the TV on again. The State Department was preparing for another press briefing. This should be good, Kai thought as his jaw clenched tight enough to crush a femur. Chapter 6. Washington, D.C. 26th of February, 2021. 1100 Eastern Standard Time. There was a still shot of Stacy's face from the press conference, looking particularly exasperated and unattractive. She locked her phone and put it in her jacket pocket. She had to stop reading the memes and comments. They would drive her insane. Her driver pulled beneath the White House portico and stopped it. It was the first time she had been brought to the literal front door, which was far from comforting. Time to face the music, she thought with no small measure of trepidation. The valet opened the door and she slid across the leather seat and got out. It was a particularly ugly February day, cold, rainy, and gray. Stacy pulled her coat tighter and made her way into the reception area. Once inside, a staffer took her to their meeting room in the West Wing. Gary Cofield was waiting for her at the conference table, and she greeted him directly. "Good morning, Gary." Gary nodded. "Stacy?" "Is he—" "The president won't be joining us," he said matter-of-factly. Stacy frowned. "Okay." It had been nearly a week since the press conference had taken place. Since then, the story had only grown. The Pentagon had revealed that the White House had known about the incident, which only fanned the flames. Rich Simpson had been let go, and it seemed the Secretary of Defense would be next if they didn't keep the story under control. Stacy had taken a week off due to illness, and the communications director, Eric Smith, had filled in. He would be on again at 1 p.m. It was already noon, but the lateness was intentional. This was damage control. The less time, the lower the chance of error. Stacy was here to meet with Gary ahead of her appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Connell this week. Gary was typing something on his phone. After what seemed like an eternity, he put it down and looked up. "All right, let's review this." "Okay." "What do they know?" he asked neutrally, his tone as patronizing as it was professional. She drew a short breath and replied, "They know how many men were killed, and where they died. They also know that the president knew." "What is your job?" She fought the urge to scowl at being treated with such condescension, but she was a professional. "I explain why it isn't a big deal and don't reveal anything else. I'm not an idiot, Gary. It was a bad moment. I'll be fine." Gary quirked a brow, and an ominous silence ensued before his reply. "This isn't going away anymore, Stacy. When you get back out there, you better bring your A-game. Did you see the news this morning?" She had. The minority leader in the House was calling for an investigation of a possible cover-up. They wanted to know why the Navy didn't send help, and how involved the White House had been. They were trying to cripple the president's political momentum. With a majority in Congress, it seemed he was on the verge of enacting much of his platform. This story could be the proverbial wrench in the gears, and it was their job to remove that wrench. There was a knock on the door. Stacy jumped slightly. "Come in," Gary invited. Stacy looked at him with confusion, but Gary ignored her. The door opened to reveal a young man. Dressed too casually for the White House, Stacy knew immediately that he wasn't from Washington. He seemed too modern. "Stacy, this is Aziz Cook," Gary introduced. "He's here from Bingle." Stacy nodded. "Hi there." Aziz smiled back at her, but the expression never quite reached his eyes. Gary gestured for Aziz to sit. "Aziz is here to talk to us about some of the things Bingle can do to combat conspiracy theories, such as the ones we've been seeing over the last few days." The Bingle representative opened a laptop on the table. "Exactly. So would you like to go ahead and get started?" "By all means," Gary confirmed. "Great." Aziz flashed another grin, this one both pleasant and predatory. "I think you guys are really going to like this. Let's take a recent example. About half a dozen sites have been reposting a story alleging that the Katie Ansari kidnapping was a setup by the CIA. He started typing, causing results to appear on his company's search engine, an engine responsible for at least 80% of all worldwide searches. "Now, obviously, something like that is false," he said with surprising poise and polish. "But let's say I've heard this version of events, and I go to a search window and type Katie Ansari setup CIA. He turned the screen to them. "Here's what I get. Now you can see the top results here. Conspiracy theorists target Katie Ansari. Katie Ansari and the CIA. Anatomy of a fake news scandal." But if I scroll down a bit, we still see some links to sites that are spreading the story. "Did the CIA plan the attack on Katie Ansari? Insider claims CIA knew about the Sea King." He pulled back the laptop. "Now, if I were to search for something more generic, I wouldn't get any of the fake stories. There's too much legitimate stuff being published by established sources, so our algorithms will automatically sort the credible sources to the top. The problem comes in when people start searching for more specific terms, like I just did. Of course, we had the legitimate stuff at the top, but right below it, we're still getting the fake stuff." Gary leaned forward. "So let me guess, you guys have something figured out for that." "You got it," Aziz nodded. "We're calling this our Safe Search feature. Essentially, what it does is filter out search results from a rolling list of sites that are known to be propagating fake news. The best part is that this is now the default mode for the search engine. A user can turn it off manually in the settings, but only 6% of users even know it's something they can toggle, and only about half of those actually turn it off." Stacy began to see where he was going with this, and decided to put her oar in. "So how do you determine your list of credible versus fake sites?" "That's a great question. Part of this is easy, and it just involves manually picking out sites that are obviously fake, or blocking sites that have IP addresses from certain known trouble regions. Of course, it's a bit more complicated than that, and it isn't really foolproof. Which brings me to why I'm here." He closed the laptop. "We want to initiate a partnership with the public sector to identify and flag problem sites more accurately." Gary smiled, and even Stacy felt a shiver at seeing the expression on his face as he asked, "How can we help?" Aziz leaned back in his chair. "Well, there are a couple of options. We know you can't spend all day searching for conspiracy theories on the internet. Thankfully, we already have analysts that do similar work, and we know you have law enforcement agencies that also do this type of thing. We would be willing to consider a variety of options, such as setting up a task force right here in our DC offices to work on this kind of stuff. We're flexible on the how, and we think there's a lot we can do if we just get the right people in a room together." Gary leaned back, mimicking the man's posture. "I see what you're saying. Stacy, what do you think?" She recalled all the memes of her tripping, fueled by partisan sites who never faltered in their attacks on the administration. "I think it's a wonderful idea." Gary nodded curtly. "I agree. Why don't we elevate this to the right people, and we can get in touch with some of your people and start to make something happen." Aziz smiled. "That sounds great." The three stood and shook hands, and the corporate officer packed up his things and left the room. Once he had gone, Gary smiled at Stacy. He seemed to be in much higher spirits. "Well, that was cool, wasn't it?" he said happily. "Yeah," she agreed. "If only we'd had that 10 years ago." Gary smiled, and another shiver went down her spine. "You see, Stacy, things are already looking better." Chapter 7. Secret Bay, North Shore, Kauai. 26th of February, 2021, 1400 Hawaiian Standard Time. It had been a week since the briefing, and Kai had hardly thought about anything else. After doing some more research, he had even sent an anonymous tip to the New York Times, as if they would do anything about it. But the truth was, he was powerless to do anything from the islands. Kai walked down the hall to his bedroom and opened his closet door. He unlocked a cabinet inside and retrieved a small black case. Placing it on his bed, he unlatched the fasteners which kept it securely shut and pulled the satellite phone from its padded cutout. Gunner's number was printed on a white slip of paper and affixed with clear tape on the back side. He dialed the number and waited. Gunner Davis was Kai's commander during his time with Tiger Corps. An old cowboy, Gunner had been through every branch of military service before they had finally managed to get rid of him. And he used his pension to start Tiger Corps, Tactical Insertion Global Response Corporation. Kai always joked that the whole thing was just Gunner's way of avoiding retirement. Technically based in Kenya, the small group made most of its play money by pulling security for state officials in Africa. The rest of the time, they got into whatever kind of trouble Gunner could dream up. Having connections with military and government officials in nearly every hotspot on Earth meant that he could dream up a lot. It also meant that he knew a lot. The ringtone had been beeping for nearly a minute before the line connected. There was a muffled grunt and then silence. "Gunner?"
Who the fuck is it?
Came the thick, southern accent. "Gunner, it's Kai Priest."
Kai?
Gunner's voice was equal parts annoyance and surprise.
You know what time it is here?
"Yeah, I know." There was a pause and a sigh.
I know why you're calling me.
What happened?
Listen, buddy, I can't say too much. All I know are rumors. You know how these things are. You gotta talk to Keikoa. He knows just as much as me, probably more.
He's not talking.
Well, he's your family, ain't he? He'll talk to you.
Gunner groaned like he was sitting up.
Listen, I know you and Steven were real close. You relax a little bit. Have a couple of drinks with Keikoa and he'll tell you.
He paused again.
I know it's hard, brother, but he knows you're pissing fire right now. He is too, deep down. It never gets any easier with losing guys. Never. Believe me.
This is different, Gun, Kai said with iron resolve. A brief pause.
Talk to your uncle. You hear him out, and if you still want to talk to me after that, you come pay old Gunny a visit. I'm getting fucking bored out here anyway.
Kai almost smiled. All right. It's good to hear from you.
You too, brother.
Kai ended the call and tossed the phone down on the bed. As he did, he heard the front door open downstairs. He walked down the stairs and turned the corner. McKenna was in the kitchen, humming as she set down a bag of groceries on the counter. Kai watched her for a moment. The sun beamed through the kitchen window, and it brought out the mocha streaks in her dark brown hair. She turned and saw him, smiling as she took off her headphones. She only looked at him a moment and saw his brooding expression. "What's wrong, babe?" He almost didn't want to tell her. Her world was free of violence, free from loyalties to people halfway around the world. Her world was simple. But he loved her, so he didn't have a choice. Something's going on. What do you mean? Her brow furrowed in confusion. Something's happened to Steven. Steven Erickson? Yeah. He nodded but couldn't find any more words. What do you mean something's happened? He paused before exhaling with the words. He's dead, McKenna. Her face contorted, and she brought her hand to her mouth, the new diamond ring on her finger glinting in the sun's ray. What? I'm sorry, he said, but he was already miles down the coast from sorry. She shook her head in disbelief. On a mission? He nodded. But there's more to the story, and I need to fix it. McKenna looked at him in silence, and her confusion slowly transformed into fear. What are you talking about? I'm going to talk to Keikoa tonight, Kai replied. Someone messed up and got Steven killed. A tear rolled down her cheek and she quickly wiped it away. So what do you mean you're going to fix it? I don't know, McKenna. It was partly true. He didn't know how. All he knew was what. And in his world, that was usually enough. She walked over to him and put her hand on his arm. Kai. He gazed into her deep brown eyes. He loved her more than he had ever loved anyone. He loved her enough to live for her, or to die for her. But for men like Kai, some things were more important than love. He knew she wouldn't understand, even if he somehow found the right words. So he said the only thing he could. It'll be okay, McKenna. They stood there for a long, quiet moment, knowing there was nothing else to say. Eventually, he folded his arms around her and kissed her. After he pulled back, he met her beautiful brown eyes and said, I need to leave for a while. I'm sorry. She wiped another tear. Okay, I understand. He picked his wallet and keys up off the counter and walked out the door. McKenna had never understood Kai's desire to leave the islands, to join the military, any of it. They had tried to make it work, but eventually split for years while Kai bounced between the special forces and private contracting. It was during a visit home that they had finally reconnected, and Kai swore to her that he would leave Gunner's team and come home, and she swore that she would agree to marry him when the day came. He had made good on his promise, and she on hers. He and McKenna had gotten engaged the past fall, intending to settle into island life for as many days as remained to them. But that was before this. He hadn't asked for this, but it was here and there was no hiding from it. He had to deal with it. Once he was outside, he dialed Keikoa. He picked up and Kai began talking before his uncle could say anything. "I'm coming back over there, and you're going to tell me what happened. Listen to me, Makua. I'm going to see this through one way or another. You can either help me, or you can let me go alone, but it's done. You would have done the same for my father." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone.
"You come by tonight, and I'll tell you what you want to know."
"I'll be there." Kai hung up the phone. Chapter 8. New York City, New York. 27th February 2021, 2200 Eastern Standard Time. Johnny Connell live. Stacy had finally made it. Since she had started as a journalist at WPAC 47 local news, she had been waiting for this moment. At heart, all journalists were performers. They started young, each clawing their way through endless hours of weather reports and local fairs, traffic at 5, and more details at 11. This is what they were clawing for. A chance in the spotlight. A chance to be a beautiful and beloved personality. Johnny Connell himself had started as a cameraman, until they discovered he was better on the other side of the lens. He certainly delivered. He was stylish, he was charming, he was funny, he was good-hearted, he was an advocate for women, an advocate for immigrants, an advocate for every nice-seeming oppressed class. He was America's voice, or at least the voice for its better half. He was popular. To be on that level was what every journalist aspired to. Forget all the hard-hitting reports, all the juicy leads and shocking scandals. This was still the real top. Yucking it up with senators one day and pop stars the next. 10 million Twitter followers hanging on your every witticism. This is what being loved looked like. But for all her excitement, Stacy had never imagined that her moment would come like this. She never imagined that she would be trending on 3 platforms, in a bad way. Fox News pundit Sean Wallace's coverage of her press conference was now in the top 3 trending videos on YouTube for the week. Conservative news didn't trend. She had done that. When they had called YouTube, their analysts said their algorithm couldn't suppress this much real traffic. Humiliating. It was all she had just to keep it together. But it ended here. The memes of her tripping, the mockery, it could actually be good for her career. It was bullying. She was a victim of something now, an advocate. She just had to make sure that wasn't all she was. In the makeup room, she reviewed the list of questions sent to them by the show and ran through her talking points one more time. They would have to bring up the press conference, but it would be light. He would let her explain herself, clear the air. "We are protecting American lives every day," she repeated in her head. She would emphasize the words, every day. "Is that good for your cheeks, Miss Long?" the makeup artist asked a bit too gently. She was sick of being tiptoed around, like she had some illness. "A bit more blush, thank you." After a few more minutes, the producer came into the room. "How do you feel? You ready?" Stacy smiled. "I'm ready. How's the crowd?" He smiled back. "Nice and warm. You'll be great." Another few minutes and she was standing behind the curtain. The lights already felt hot. She could hear Johnny introducing her. "You all know our next guest as the President's press secretary, the lovely lady born and raised right here in New York, Stacy Long!" The crowd whooped and cheered as she walked out to the stage. They looked like one big, dark mass with the lights pointed at her. There he was, smiling right at her as she crossed the stage, carefully minding each step. As was so often the case, he seemed smaller in person. "Stacy, welcome to The Tonight Show." He grasped her hand warmly. "And I must say, you crossed that stage very gracefully." The crowd laughed. They were putty in his hands. "Thank you, Johnny. I've been very careful lately," she said with a smile. Johnny looked out to the crowd. "How about another hand for Stacy?" More whoops and cheering. Stacy waved, smiling. Please, take a seat, Johnny said as the cheers trailed off, gesturing to the red club chair positioned next to his stage desk. Stacy sat and looked at Johnny. She was more comfortable now. She was ready. So, Stacy, he leaned towards her. I just want to say, he looked to the side stage as if checking with someone. Can I say this? I'm a huge fan. Whoops and cheering, shorter this time. Well, thank you, Johnny. You know, I'm starting to realize more people watch my press briefings than I thought. Johnny let out a good-hearted laugh, and the crowd followed suit as he replied. So, if it's all right with you, let's talk about last week. The way I understand it, there was a power cord or something in the aisle? Yes, exactly, she said with a practiced sigh. We try to tell the camera folks to watch their cords, but every now and then one will get you. You just hope it isn't on national television. More laughs. This was going well. I can certainly understand that, Johnny nodded. So, I want to get into more details about the press conference. But first, I wanted to ask you about Katie Ansari. I understand you two are very close. How is she holding up? Yes, Katie and I have become very close over the past couple months, and I think she's doing okay. In fact, we talked this morning before the show because she was worried about me. Johnny chuckled and his expression softened as she continued. But you know, seriously, as you can imagine, what she went through was a very traumatic experience. I'm not sure you can even fully understand how something like that is going to impact you for a couple of months, or even years after it happens. She has been so strong. She's been talking to someone who specializes in dealing with these types of post-traumatic effects, and I think she's doing really well. Well, we're certainly all wishing her the best, Johnny said with a short nod, drawing approving sounds from the crowd. I'm sure you had a hand in shaping some of the president's remarks at Andrews Air Force Base. Why did he decide to speak there? Well, I think it really just goes back to underlining the message he brought to the campaign, she said, leaning into the moment with all her professional poise. This incident was obviously very close to home for him, but since the very beginning he has been out there saying that our military can't do it all. The time for the American military to go it alone in these areas of the world is coming to an end. It's about making the world a safer place for everyone, not even just Americans. The audience applauded as Johnny nodded. Well, I would probably agree with that. So, talking now more specifically about some of the things you were being asked about during this press conference. We all know the stories going around about the 5 actually, Special Forces operators who were tragically killed in some kind of ambush in the same area. It's been in the news a lot, and different people have been making a lot of claims about what did or didn't happen. I know a lot of the details are still classified, but I wanted you to have the final word. What can you tell us about that? Well, Johnny, like you said, most of it is still classified. And the investigation is ongoing, so we still don't have all the facts, she said with measured solemnity. But what we do know is that these men were not involved in the mission to rescue Katie Ansari, though they were in the same area. After they came under attack, there was some kind of delay in communication, probably due to equipment failure. By the time rescuers arrived, it was too late. Okay, so what do you make of those members of Congress now calling for hearings? Well, Johnny, I think it's sad. She infused her voice with sympathy and just a touch of condescension. It's sad that we've seen some members of Congress posting links to hateful conspiracy theories on their social media accounts. I mean, ultimately, they're trying to politicize the deaths of 5 Americans. We need to be better than this. It's unacceptable. More cheers and clapping from the audience. I understand, Johnny said with a smile as warm as the lights overhead. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back with more of White House Press Secretary Stacy Long. Cheers and clapping. Stacy smiled and waved as the lights turned off. Chapter 9. Keikoa's Lair, North Shore, Kauai. 26th of February, 2021, 8:15 Hawaiian Standard Time. The sun was just beginning to set as Kai's truck made its way down the valley towards Keikoa's mountain. The road here turned to auburn clay, sticking out from the green foliage like a great big scar across the jungle. There was something spiritual about this place, and it was palpable even inside a car. He wasn't quite sure if it was because these trees held some special place in his memory, or if they had this effect on everyone. Regardless of the circumstances, making this drive had always calmed him down. But not this time. This time, Kai's mood was as dark as a moonless night, and nothing could brighten it. Warriors learned to expect the unexpected on the battlefield. They accepted the risk of encountering the unknown. Ops went bad all the time, and good men died when they did. But these ops didn't just go bad, especially not so close to the president. Someone knew what happened, and if anyone on the islands knew, it was Keikoa. The fact that Keikoa didn't give him the full story when he first told him meant it was something bad. Talking to Gunner had confirmed it. Something was off, and Kai would find out what that was. The road got steeper and steeper until he finally reached the bar. As he got out of the truck and shut the door, the warm air rushed to embrace him. The heat of the day had not yet passed, but darkness was just beginning to overtake the jungle, the cicadas growing louder with each passing minute. Keikoa was sitting on the porch, waiting for him.
Come sit with me, Kailani.
Kai walked up the stairs and sat down in the rocking chair next to his uncle. The older man rocked gently, back and forth, back and forth. He was as much a part of the landscape here as a rock or a tree. Kai remained motionless and upright. Are you going to tell me what happened, Makua? Keikoa rocked in silence for a long while. Finally, he spoke.
Let me tell you a story, Kailani.
He took a deep breath and paused, long enough for Kai to wonder if he would continue speaking.
When you were a boy, I took you out to swim by Monaco Island. But when we got there, it had started to storm, and the tide had shifted out, making the channel between the shore and the island impassable. But you were already in the water, and you kept saying to me, I can make it, Makua. I can make it, Makua. Do you remember?
Kai nodded. He had started to drown, and his uncle swam out to rescue him. It was one of the most vivid memories of his life, fresh in his mind as Keikoa continued.
During the time of our ancestors, there were many tribes on this island. From time to time, these tribes would make war between themselves. When the fighting began, the first 2 men to die on either side became Mohai, a sacrifice to the gods. It was said that their spirits became waves, relentless spirits of the sea, never again to rest until the oceans themselves were destroyed at the end of the world.
Keikoa let his words linger on the breeze for a long while before turning to look at him.
You know, Kailani, sometimes I think you were born as one of these waves, never at rest.
Kai considered his uncle's words for a long while before replying. I spoke with Gunnar today. He won't tell me what happened.
Did it ever occur to you that he may not have told you because he doesn't know?
He said I should talk to you, Kai retorted. Keikoa smiled.
I'm sure he did. After the number of times I bailed him out of some kuke. Ask him about Rhodesia next time you talk to him. He likes to forget that one.
He was just as close to Stephen as I was, Kai pressed, unwilling to be thrown off track.
I know he was, Kailani.
Keikoa leaned back now and stopped his gentle rock.
I remember when I first met Stephen. He was just some jarhead Heole from nowhere. But he had no fear, just like you. Do you remember when he tried to do that dive with you?
Kai leaned forward. Please, Makua. I don't have time for this. I need to know what happened.
Do you remember?
Kai sighed in frustration. Yeah, I remember.
He almost ended up like you at Monaco.
His uncle chuckled softly before all traces of mirth vanished and he fell silent. Kai felt Keikoa's unflinching gaze on him, which he met as his elder spoke.
The way we honor the dead, Kailani, is to remember them.
You honor him in your way, and let me honor him in mine. Keikoa shook his head.
There's no talking you out of anything. Just like your mother.
Kai stood. Fine. Have it your way. He had gotten halfway down the stairs when Keikoa spoke again.
This was a big one, Kailani. Big trouble.
Kai stopped, but did not turn, listening from the 4th step as his uncle continued.
That is why I'm worried.
The concern in Keikoa's voice was so unexpected that Kai turned and faced him in surprise. Who was responsible?
This was no operator stunt,
Keikoa said gravely.
This whole thing was from the top. But you know that already. You watch the news.
Who do I need to find? Keikoa paused and sighed.
There is a man named Mitchell Stevenson. He knows what happened.
Who is he? CIA? Keikoa nodded. You know I'm going to go, and you know I need your help. After another sigh, Keikoa rocked forward in his chair and stood.
Come with me.
Kai followed his uncle into the house, where Keikoa went to a simple table upon which rested a large black case. Kai thought it looked like a rifle case as Keikoa placed it on the bar, pulling a key from his pocket. He opened the padlock and undid the clasps holding the case shut.
Come around here,
he beckoned, and Kai came around to look over his uncle's shoulder. Sometimes he forgot what a small man he was. Keikoa seemed so solid that in Kai's imagination he always seemed about 6 inches taller until Kai stood next to him. Keikoa lifted the lid to reveal no rifle within, just a black duffel bag. Keikoa unzipped it and retrieved a black leather map case.
There's some old camera equipment in here,
Keikoa explained.
This is what you're interested in.
He pulled out a few metal rods and screwed them together. Then he pulled out another piece.
This goes on the end of the rifle. It needs a 7.62mm bore.
He pulled out another small case and, unzipping it, produced a small metal tip, not unlike those he had fired 1,000 times from bows or spear guns.
These screw on to the end of the spear. It will give you about an hour of sleep.
Kai nodded, partially in disbelief that his uncle had prepared all of this beforehand.
You fire it with a blank round,
Keikoa continued.
You remember how to make a blank round, don't you?
Kai nodded with only a hint of annoyance at the question. He knew his uncle was showing love the only way he could, but the form it took still managed to surprise him. Keikoa put the items back in the case and reclasped it.
Okay, there are a few more tricks to this system. I will show them to you later, but for now, I want you to go home. Spend a few more days with your woman, pack what you need, and then come back.
I will, Kai promised, glad to have his uncle's support in such a dark hour. Keikoa inclined his chin towards the door.
Now get out of here before I change my mind.
Kai nodded and turned to go, but it was no small effort to keep a smile from his lips. It was time to fix this. Chapter 10. New York City, New York. 28th of February, 2021. 0900 Eastern Standard Time. Leilani pushed through the revolving metal door and left the cold wind outside for the calm warmth of the New York Times lobby. It had been nearly 20 years since she left Hawaii for Harvard, and she thought at this point she would never acclimate to northeastern weather. On windy days, the gusts gathered force as they careened between the skyscrapers that lined the sides of every street, until they were nearly strong enough to blow her over on her walk to work. But the wind she could handle. It was the nightly dome of starlight she missed most. Still, the feeling of entering this building every day made any amount of bad weather worth it. The open office concept featured hundreds of desks lined up from wall to wall, where they met floor-to-ceiling glass windows that displayed the buzzing city below. It felt like a war room, placed right in the middle of the beating heart of American culture. She walked down one of the aisles to her seat, passing dozens of busy journalists and their staff. Setting down her coffee, she took off her jacket and unpacked her laptop, plugging it into the port at her desk. She pulled up her calendar to see what the day had in store. Another White House press briefing at 1 p.m. She was supposed to watch them all in real time, but she mostly used the time to eat lunch or catch up on emails at her desk. She could hardly blame herself, as they rarely contained anything interesting, or at least anything new. The last few, however, had been a bit more engrossing. Ever since Press Secretary Stacy Long had nearly fallen on her face after giving a series of fumbling answers about dead operators. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Leilani almost felt bad for her. The result was that Long had been kept off the air for most of the week. Leilani was confident today would be uneventful. The administration was being careful now, giving as little information as they could, trying to wait out the story. That was fine with Leilani. She had already done her share of reporting on war scandals. Having cut her journalistic teeth in Iraq on leads about Abu Ghraib, she had spent the better part of the last decade writing stories about dead soldiers and dead civilians. In her view, it was always the same thing. People wanted the military to always have everything under control. What people failed to realize was that the military, for all its supposed organization, was just another part of the government, subject to the same inefficiencies as any human enterprise. Their mistakes just cost more. In other words, she didn't believe in conspiracies, just humans doing human things. She had recently moved on to reporting on financial scandals. To her surprise and mild dissatisfaction, She found it remarkably similar to her previous work, except it lacked the human factor, which made it dry work from dawn to dusk. "Hey, Lay, did you see what I sent you?" asked Grant, another reporter on her team. She had gotten used to him finding a reason to stop by every morning. "No, I didn't see it." "Could be interesting. Some guy called in a lead about those dead Special Forces guys." "Okay, I'll take a look." She turned back to her screen. "Yeah, left a message, didn't leave his name. We tried to call back. Nothing," Grant shrugged. "He said they couldn't have been ambushed without the Navy knowing where they were, and was convinced they were responding to the Katie Ansari kidnapping." "I'm sure it was just some nut job," she dismissed while opening her email. "What did Ross say?" "I haven't shown it to him yet." Leilani flashed a smile. "I guess you should start there." Grant walked away and Leilani opened the email he had been referring to. It had little more detail than what she had just heard. The message told them to contact the commander of the USS Ronald Reagan, Robert Carmichael. Well, ex-commander now, she thought. Whoever had sent the message certainly valued their privacy, calling from a blocked number. Usually the people who called in were looking for attention, which was usually the first sign they were bullshitting. She thought it was odd that the pirates had been able to make it all the way to shore with the president's daughter before being intercepted. Still, she doubted it was worth her time. Ross Garrett, Leilani's manager, sent a memo asking to speak with her that morning. She wasn't sure why. He usually left her alone for the most part. So after she finished reading the news, she made her way down the aisle and up the stairs to his office. She knocked on the transparent glass door and he motioned her to come inside. "You wanted to see me?" Ross looked up from his screen, the white light reflecting off his glasses. "Yes, take a seat." Leilani walked into the small office and sat down across from Ross's imposing glass desk. He finished his work a moment later and focused his attention on her. "So, how are things? How's the research coming?" She was supposed to be researching for an article on bank fraud. Truth be told, she had hardly started. She was sure something was there, but just hadn't gotten around to the evidence part yet. "It's going well. I should have something for you soon." Good, good. I actually wanted to talk to you about something different." "Okay, sure," she said in muted relief. "I'm sure you've seen the news the past few days about these dead men." She nodded that she had, and he continued. "Well, the White House is telling us that they are going to present some results of their initial investigation on Friday, and I want you to go." Leilani was shocked. "Really? Shouldn't that be Rachel?" she asked, referring to their White House correspondent. "Well, technically yes. She'll be there too. But we want you to go along. We've already cleared it. You obviously have a history writing about these kinds of incidents, so we figured it was a natural fit. We want you to do a story on it." "Okay, sure." Leilani paused for a moment. "Did you get an email from Grant about some guy who called in?" Ross frowned. "Yeah, I saw that." "You think there's anything there?" "I don't think so." For some reason, his demeanor hit her wrong. The reporter in her smelled something, and she found herself focusing on it as a result. "You don't think it's odd that it took so long for Katie Ansari to get rescued?" Ross considered his words before answering. "I don't think so. Between you and me, I've been talking to one of our sources at the CIA. They've assured me that this whole thing is just a big foul-up by the Pentagon. So I would start with that assumption and work from there. But honestly, the White House is going to present a lot of good information. So I would make that the base of your story." As he spoke, she realized what was going on. The White House wanted to borrow some of her credibility to float their chosen narrative. Fine. She would play ball, but now her interest was piqued. She wanted to know how this whole thing got bungled, and after reading the anonymous tip, she would start by searching for Robert Carmichael.